Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Give me a call at 713-526-5738. That is 713-526-KPFT. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you very much for spending this time with us. We are honored to have you. How art thou doing, Shannon?
I'm doing great. It's a nice, beautiful day outside.
I know.
today.
We should have done that little video promo outside and gotten the beautiful sunlight and all that good stuff.
Next time. We still have a good amount of time while spring lasts before it gets too crazy hot.
I know, but we're going to have a great show today, because, we watch our American politics here, and we also we kind of wonder what other people from other places think about it. And you know what, Shannon?
I've heard in the past.
But I got to tell this story. I didn't write this down, but I have to tell this story. I got an email from Mike and Madeline. These are my old proteges from Move to Amend, and now they are HACP, all those guys. And they said, hey, we got an email or we got a note on our website with these two young ladies from Finland and Sweden, right? And said that, they were interested in talking to us. And I said, hey, yes. He said, are you interested in doing something with the show? And I said, where are they from? Then I said, Scandinavia. And I said, wait, we had a guy in town, or this guy running for president that's been talking a hell of a lot about Scandinavia. Who is that guy again? Come on, journalist. Who's that guy?
Sanders.
Yeah. Can you believe that? So I said, you know what? That'll make a great show. You know what I mean? We can hear from other people. But anyway, let's get busy, folks. Let's get busy. Here how it goes. Look, we are going to have a great show today. As you know, Donald Trump continues on a roll. As much as I try to make this a Donald Trump-free zone, it is impossible. Anyway, Politics Done Right is honored to have two European journalists, specifically Scandinavian journalists, in the studio. I cannot wait to hear their impressions of the American body politic. It's going to be quite interesting, right? Anyway, Sanna, and I hope I don't destroy your name, but Sanna Björling? Björling. Sanna Björling, a native of Uppsala, Sweden, is the Washington, D.C.-based correspondent for Dagens Nyheter. Okay, I tried. A Swedish major daily newspaper since 2013. Previously, she was a journalist at DN in Stockholm as a financial desk reporter and editor at the culture section, among her many positions at the magazine. She was also a journalist at Moderna Tider, a magazine on politics and current events. We also have, with our presence, Laura, this I think is easier, Saarikoski. Okay, so it's more like the Latin sound. Okay, it's a U.S.-based correspondent for Helsingin Sanomat, a.k.a. Helsinki Times, an independent daily established in 1889 and the largest newspaper in Scandinavia. She has been a reporter and feature editor, among other positions, with the paper of 20 years. She covers U.S. politics, economics, lifestyle, culture, and all permutations thereof, right? All permutations thereof. She covered Bush v. Gore. I'm so sorry.
It was fun.
I'm so sorry. And have been to 46 states and hoping to get to 50 more states.
50 more?
Oh, no, not 50 more states. We only have 50 states. You're trying to get to the other 4 states in the country. But what is quite interesting is that she's probably going to see more states than any Americans possibly going to see in their lifetime. Anyhow, I want to acknowledge and thank a few renewing members of our KPFT family. They generously contributed to our station to ensure the progressive narratives continue to be heard. James Olmert, returning member from Houston, Texas. Thank you very much. Bruce Pollard actually lives in Kingwood, Texas. returning as well. Thank you very much. Before we get into the program, I want to remind all our listeners that KPFT is a bastion of intelligent voices and programs. As a political activist, my favorites are The Monitor with Mark Vivawi at 7 p.m., Think Wing Radio with Mike Honig on Mondays at 9 p.m., and Partisan Gridlock with Jeff Berg on Fridays at 3 p.m. And you know what I love? Jazz Latino, Afro-Cuban Latin jazz. And it's Very Best Host by Juan Flores on Mondays at 10 p.m. Check out our website, kpft.org, for all the information. And we are honored to have the presence of Mike Badziak and Madeline Cosette with us as well. Thank you for being in the studio with us today as well.
Well, you're welcome, Egberto. Glad to be here.
Well, we go back a long time. But anyway, before I get into the blog of the week, welcome to Houston, Texas. Welcome to Texas. Texas is really America, right?
Thank you.
Did they tell you that?
Sure.
Okay.
When you say Texas to me, I'm thinking
I know. Yes.
Yeah, I grew up with that.
So, what was your first impression when you got to Texas?
I was here. I was actually in Dallas a couple of years ago for the JFK assassination anniversary.
Right.
And Dallas was, of course, as Laura said, I was looking for places, and I never got to South Fork, but it's.
Didn't go to South Fork?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
and then I've been to Amarillo, and that was very flat and very conservative.
Yes.
I went to a beef feed yard there, which was very interesting. I did a story on beef.
I'm so sorry.
That was okay.
And what was your impression?
Well, we came to Austin on Sunday night and we were doing one of the stories there, and it sort of struck me that it was really hard to find conservatives in Austin.
Yes.
And my impression on Texas was something totally different. So I know that Austin is this liberal bubble and very sort of proud of it.
Yes.
But now we've exited the bubble and hope to survive.
Yeah, and Houston is quite a mixture. What do you guys think? Is Houston conservative, liberal, moderate? What would you consider Houston?
I think it's actually quite conservative with a strong base, strong but small liberal group, but mostly conservative.
That breaks my heart. I went to school in Austin, and this is a left station. We're liberal to the core. But anyhow, it is about that time, and then we'll get back into the program. So what time is it, folks?
It's time for the weekly blog post.
I'm going to shorten this one a little bit, but here it goes. Folks, Donald Trump won a huge victory in Nevada last night. The interesting thing is that he won just about every demographic voting in the primary. He even won, guess whom? Latinos. Think about that. Donald Trump won Latinos. Yes, the numbers are low, but I will tell you from personal experience, it could actually be probative for the Latinos who vote. A few days ago, I shadowed and reported on dreamer Cesar Vargas, who visited Houston to help with outreach in the Latino community. Vargas and Houston Bernie Sanders supporters were canvassing Latino neighborhoods. I have a little video in the blog post that shows that as well. But anyhow, it was shocking to observe the son of the owner of a home who said he was a conservative Republican with a college education and wanted to have no discussion. More shocking were the statements he made echoing Donald Trump almost verbatim. There is a vile dynamic that is occurring that is not seen in polls, but seen all over communities exposed to the Trump infection. And yes, that's what I call it, a Trump infection. One can now hear various black people saying President Obama has done little for them. Some even say they will vote for Donald Trump. They are echoing the man's speeches that the media gives much coverage to. The media? The media? The maker of Trump? Anyhow, Donald Trump was at first a joke. The mainstream media made a whole lot of money promoting him. His spectacle gets what? What are all the media's looking for right now? Eyeballs. Eyeballs. It's about how many eyeballs I can get. It's about how many clicks I can get. They are echoing this man's speeches the media gives much coverage to. Look, let me tell you something. The media is attributing his victory to the anger in America over the establishment. An article in The Guardian said it best. and I wrote a whole bunch about it, but I'm not going to say it. The most important part about it said, anger has a clarity all its own. It renders most detail extraneous, and it animates like nothing else. It is not to be underestimated, and at this point, we will probably have to wait until November to find out if it truly has been. I can tell you, folks, from a people that have elected an actor, Ronald Reagan, for a people that have elected what many have called Texas's resident, and I won't use the word on air, yes, it is possible that Donald Trump could be our next president. So here's the deal. If the grassroots leaders in America do not begin a concerted effort to educate, Donald Trump will be your next president. The plutocracy would not blink an eye, as they know he is a part of them. As they know he is a part of them. So, ladies, before we go into the discussion with respect to some of the questions I want to ask you, I really want to know what the people in your part of the world think about the United States, that they're giving serious consideration to a man named Donald Trump.
I think that in Sweden, Donald Trump is seen as at the first time, an absurdity. That is this real? Mm-hmm. It's people are maybe a little bit amused, but also shocked, I think, and extremely interested in how this plays out and how this could come about.
Now, when you're writing your articles, first of all, are you writing a whole lot of articles concerning Donald Trump?
Sure.
So
on other candidates as well, of course.
But
yeah, so I covered them all. I'm not.
You're not biased.
I'm not.
But you're covering them all.
Yes.
And I imagine you're writing it for the Swedish audience, or
for the Swedish audience. So you have to, of course, you don't cover all the details in all the campaigns, and you can't you have to do it. You have to explain it in another way, of course, because we don't follow all the campaigns that closely, and people aren't really interested in candidate X, Y, Z in the very detail, but they're interested in the bigger picture and how this works.
Now, what are you highlighting? I am very curious to know what people, as a European journalist, when you're taking this information to folks who don't understand the intricacies of the United States political system, how do you explain that?
Well, I think it's quite interesting. Of course, you describe what happens on these rallies. I think of course, I can watch Donald Trump on TV, but it's also when you come to his rallies, that's when you feel the atmosphere in the room, and you can and more interested then, of course, and also what he says, of course, but then talking to the people who are there and trying to, and that's also the challenge, right? Because you have to try and explain why is he so popular? There's a reason for it. It's not that it just happens. It has a background, and he wouldn't be this popular if it wasn't for a number of different reasons. And I think the stagnating wages, for example, and the economical situation that many Americans feel is one of them.
Is that what they tell you when you actually, as a Swedish report?
They tell me they tell us that that they're angry. That's that's at least what I mean. The anger.
What have they told you they are angry about when you go to one of his rallies?
Well, I would say that Bernie Sanders supporters and Donald Trump supporters share much of the sort of anti-establishment hatred, and also dislike of the fact that that the wages haven't been increasing for a long time. The middle class is lagging behind. There's no more, you can't educate your kids. You can't pay the student loans. The way at the way at which they direct their anger is different. I mean, obviously, most Donald Trump supporters direct their anger towards immigrants, whereas Sanders supporters talk about the campaign finance reform. But you can't belittle that feeling of resentment and anger in American public. You can't sort of, explain it away. It is real, and we've both seen it and talked to people. I went to Galesburg, Illinois a couple of weeks ago, where they closed a big Maytag refrigerator factory 10 years ago, and most of the old workers who used to be staunch Democrats and union people are now supporting Donald Trump, not necessarily because they think that he would achieve everything and bring all the jobs back. But then again, who else would? I mean, nothing else has helped. For 10 years, other politicians have promised to do something. And since they haven't managed to bring the jobs back, why not go with Donald Trump? That's what they say.
And they're very angry with Washington.
Now, let me tell you what concerns me, because, and I'm glad that what I have are two journalists, and I'm interested to how the coverage differs from how the coverage differs here. You made an interesting point when you said, yes, we cannot discount their anger. And yes, we cannot discount that people are angry. They have reasons to be angry. However, I think the media bears a distinct responsibility for the way the coverage of Bernie Sanders versus, let's say, a Donald Trump occurs. In other words, you're right. There is a valid anger. However, Americans would behave differently had they known, let's say, that much of the anger that they have could be directed at the policies or the things that a Donald Trump does. I mean, Donald Trump believes in, Donald Trump is an oligarch like any other oligarch out there, and he's one of the people that has his boots on their necks. But you don't have journalists actually putting that type of information out there. They are just a lot of time parroting what the different candidates say.
But don't you think? Well, I sometimes I meet people who had, especially conservative people in the rural areas with low education, and they're very convinced conservatives. But it doesn't really seem as if they realize that they are the ones that will lose mostly. And I don't think that. I'm not sure that they would change their minds if you told them. And if you see for the Trump supporters, if you tell them of the inconsistencies or that it's not really practical or very easy to get Mexico to pay for that wall, etc., they don't really care about it. I got an email from somebody. Why aren't anybody like asking him all these questions and just show that he can do all this? I'm not sure it would matter, because his supporters, they don't really care about facts. They care about emotions and about strength. Don't you think the emotions are conditioned by what they've already heard or what they've learned from and you know, as a blogger who's been very critical of the mainstream, what we call the mainstream media out here, what irks many of us is specifically that we don't buy into the fact that Americans or any other human beings are, for the lack of a better word, stupid. We think if they are given information, if they're informed, not just today. In other words, not just that you as journalists say, well, you know, Donald Trump said X, Y, and Z 10 years ago, but that when he had said X, Y, and Z 10 years ago, that it was actually newsworthy and people made known of it. What I find is that if we take a look at how media is covered, we cover for today, we forget about yesterday, and what would the average American, what would the average Scandinavian person think about if that's the type of information that they're getting? I agree that they absolutely that they could cover him in a different way. I think especially that sometimes it seems like Donald Trump is calling to the bigger shows, and he gets on air, and they're happy to have him there because he draws attention. Yeah, exactly. And they could talk more about, I think, policy than the discussions between the different candidates. But that's, of course, it's cable news driven, so they need the ads. So that's how it works. But of course, I think the policies. The policy discussion is much deeper on the Democratic side. Before, I think it had to do with the amount of candidates on the Republican side. Right, it was difficult to differentiate messages. Now, Laura, in Finland, exactly are your elected officials chosen? Do you go through the same kind of sequence that we go through here?
Yeah, our president is elected for 6 years, though, so that leaves us sort of plenty of years where there's no campaigns, for example, and then the parliament members are elected for 4 years. And then local elections. Are your elections publicly funded, or? Yeah, partly publicly funded. You may fund them as well, but there's far less money in politics. Okay, so it's a small country, like Maine. It's like comparing Maine to the United States. Right. You know what, though, when we talk about healthcare and all these issues, sometimes the narrative
is upsetting because sometimes they would say, oh, well, if we look at Scandinavia, well, actually, Scandinavia is not small if you put all the countries together. You know, I mean, I did the numbers, and it's not that bad. People would say, well, it doesn't work. You know, I mean, I'm an engineer. Math scales, right? I mean, if something works on a small level, actually, in our capitalist society, if you actually put things in, if you have larger scales, you can actually build much better efficiencies. A lot of people don't talk about that. But the reality is, if you guys were able to perfect these things, it seems like others could.
Yeah, well, it always amazes me when I meet sort of a low-income American struggling to get along, how they always just blame themselves. They always think that if I just work harder and harder and harder, then I succeed, and if I don't, it's my own fault. There's, the lack of sort of a willingness to, climb to the barricades is very low compared to how poor the living conditions here are for the,
right.
poor. And, one of the reasons maybe is that Americans have never been attracted to so-called socialism because they always think that, if I just strive hard enough, I will succeed. Maybe until now. And now you see the discontent that might actually lead to some kind of a new politics on both sides.
Okay, go ahead. Madeline, you said you wanted to add some comments.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to look at there. And one is, of course, the influence of right-wing religion on their thinking. If a lot of these people have been taught if they are righteous, they will get everything they want, but if they're not, then they weren't righteous and they weren't God's chosen. I think another thing that's really important to think about in terms of the messages from the two different parties is framing. George Lakoff wrote his famous book on framing, and the right-wing message has been framed quite differently from the left-wing message, and the right-wing message has also been broadcast much more widely because corporations have so much control over the media. Big media is corporate owned. Corporations, particularly since Citizens United, allows corporations and big money to pour so much money into elections, and they're also, in many ways, big corporations are controlling the media message.
Actually, you're right. We have corporate control media, and there's not the freedom to actually interrogate. But I tell you, she's going to have my head if we don't go to that break. So,
well, that was my comment.
Okay.
Why, thank you, Egberto. Okay, let's take a brief look at weather around town. It is currently 73 degrees and plentiful sunshine. Expect clear skies through tomorrow and a low tonight of 42 degrees. And it should be really beautiful tomorrow. A high around, close to today, about 67 degrees. Slow going on the North Freeway outbound from Telephone to West. You're tapping on the brakes on the West Loop in both directions from Evergreen to the Katy Freeway. And traffic is beginning to back up on the Southwest Freeway inbound from Westland to the Gulf Freeway and on 288 from Holcomb to 45. That's a look at your Houston area weather and traffic. I'm Shannon McCurchie, and you are listening to 90.1 KPFT Houston.
It's
Welcome back, my dear friends. We have two great journalists in town, and when Madeline and Mike said, hey, we need to bring them on the program, I said, when? And we got them here. Okay, before we go any further, I we've monopolized a lot of the communication, so let's go ahead and bring a couple of the callers in. And I just want to warn the callers that because we have so many people in here, try to be succinct as much as you can, if you will. I really would appreciate that. But anyhow, let's go to línea número uno, number one. Come on in, John from San Antonio. Come on in.
Yeah, good afternoon, Egberto.
How are you doing, my friend?
Good.
Talk to me.
Good afternoon, Laura, and I'm sorry that...
Sana?
hello.
Sana, okay.
Hi.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. One, I started reading about Sweden in my teenage years, and it was really attractive to me. And I've been a big follower of the democratic socialist movement ever since then, and also in Denmark. I just want to, like in 1936 to 1976, the democratic socialists ruled continuously. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And right now, they've had several coalition governments. Why do you think that their appeal has dropped slightly?
Oh, that's a huge question. When were you a teenager, if I may ask?
Early 80s.
Okay. I think that it's a hard question to answer. Actually, I think that the economy, and then it has gone sort of up and down with that the Social Democrats have lost. I think economic downturn, and then when it goes up again, so it follows kind of the economic cycle, and also depending on who is actually in power in people. I mean, Olof Palme was a very strong the prime minister who was killed actually next week. It was 30 years ago that he was killed, and after him, we haven't really had that kind of a leader. And I think also that people also got like a little bit sick and tired of those Social Democrats that sort of thought they had inherited the power. So, and now we have a Social Democratic government, but it's very weak because it is a coalition, and the parliamentary situation is very complicated. So it's hard for them.
What about in Finland right now and historically? I mean, I noticed the National Coalition Party is the actual ruling party, right?
Yeah, we have a coalition government of now 4 different parties. We have about 8 parties in a government in the parliament, and there are always different combinations. What has happened here in Finland, we can see also the rise of a so-called Trump phenomenon. So we've had a True Finn party that had a major victory in 2011, so that's now 5 years ago, and they are now part of the government. Not the biggest party, not the prime minister is from that party, but they very much subscribe to the same things than Trump. They are quite nationalistic and anti-immigrant, and also support sort of poor people's and people living in a countryside, their rights and their issues and values.
Okay, and also, how do each of you see Bernie Sanders in each of your countries, the population in Sweden and Finland, and what is the reaction to Bernie Sanders and his success in running?
Well, in Finland, he would be considered just a moderate social democrat. I mean, he wouldn't be anything extreme or wouldn't be called a socialist. And I think Finns are very, great fans of him, of course, because they think America is turning the Scandinavian way. And often readers get quite upset when I tell them that there is a Republican Congress and some of the things that he advocates might not be passed in reality, however valuable or great they sound. And people don't really want to hear that. They want to sort of think that the United States is going to go 10-0 to Bernie Sanders way or 10-0 Donald Trump way, without realizing that it is a very divided government, that, you can't control all branches, or very rarely you control all branches of the government at the same time.
I think it's pretty much the same in Sweden, that people don't see him as extreme at all. Maybe some of them are a little bit surprised that this self-named socialist is so popular in the United States, because this country is also very well known for not being socialist.
Right.
So I think they're amazed by that.
John, thank you very much, my friend.
All right.
Line number 2. Let's go to, Gary. Come on in, Gary.
Hello, I have just a question. I've always felt that the European people, having been there many times, that there was a certain amount of disdain toward the American attitude toward immigration, and we've been dealing with it for 20 years, and I'm wondering now, with the mass influx into Europe, if maybe average people are a little more sympathetic to the American attitude. I mean, after all, there's a reason we have countries, and if my country is now your country, you can expect a normal reaction. So I was just curious what the Europeans are thinking now that they're facing the same problem. That is my question.
Thank you, Gary.
Well, I mean, Sanna is the better person to answer about, Sweden has had far more immigrants over the last decades than Finland. But I would say that United States is far ahead, maybe 100 years ahead in this sort of a discussion about racism and diversity and multiculturalism, because you're a country of immigrants and you've had to deal with these issues for dozens and dozens of years, if not hundreds. So we're sort of taking the first baby steps, so to say, in Finland in this regard. I always say that United States is far ahead in discussion about race and Europe is far ahead in discussion about gender issues and gender equality.
I would say that in Sweden, that has, as Laura said, taken in many more immigrants and refugees. The situation is also different. I mean, here you have the immigrants from the southern border, but when you talk about refugees in Europe right now, that has during the last year been a huge crisis, as you of course know. They are actually there. So when, for example, when the United States talk about Syrian refugees, they can actually pick and choose, which they also do after like several years of vetting. In Sweden, Germany and Austria, where people have more or less the only countries in Europe that their refugees have been accepted, they're there. They stand at the central station in Hamburg, and what you do, you can't choose. And I think this has caused, of course, in Sweden a huge stress on the system, because we wanted to have open borders, or not totally open, but to accept many of them, but not hardly any of the other European countries did that.
I think, there are some false equivalences here, right? In other words, when we take a look at what we have in Mexico coming, we have people coming over for economic reasons. When we look at the migration that we have in Europe, it's because of war. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but sadly, it is a lot of wars not created by the people who are getting stumped by those people coming over, the migrants. It's a lot of wars that the big countries have laid out there, and then say, oh, well, we can't really take those people in. We cause the policies that displace them, but no, we don't want them. So, I mean, I think around the world, and, and I'll be frank with this statement, and that is, I think many times we don't allow ourselves to get the necessary critique that we need, because so many countries are fearful to apply that critique. In other words, and when I look at foreign journalists, I say the same. I mean, I would look at newspapers all over the world, and some newspapers would be brave enough to say, well, look, you caused this problem. Why don't you solve this problem? But
I think that actually is the mainstream narrative in Europe.
It is turning into the mainstream.
Well, it's been since the Iraq War. Europe has been very critical of the U.S. foreign policy. But now, of course, with the Obama administration, there is also the other side of the coin. I mean, obviously, European countries were not very eager for the U.S. to attack Iraq. But now what Obama has been doing, and I respect him because he's doing what he thinks is best for the United States, but he has had a bit of a hands-off approach in Syria. And the result hasn't been peace,
right?
But it's also resulted in this immigration crisis. So I would, of course, hope that all the world powers would somehow, get together and, finish the war in Syria, because certainly Europe won't be doing it without the United States.
Definitely. I mean, that is absolutely understood. Okay, let's go to line numero 3, City of Houston. Jeff, come on in, Jeff.
Yes. You were earlier speaking about the Houston, about not being very liberal and being a conservative city.
Yes, sir.
Are you not aware that we had the first lesbian mayor in America? We have an African mayor.
Wow. That is actually a darn good statement. That is a very good statement. I mean, something. I'm getting out of this one, Madeline. You better answer that one.
Well, I'd say that just, tells about U.S. diversity.
Yes, it does.
Best.
Yes, actually, yes, because not only had we have gay mayors, we've also had black mayors in a town like Houston, which is not majority black. So, I mean, what do you have to say about that?
It all depends on how many people come out to vote. Such a small percentage of people in the United States and in Houston vote anyway that... everything depends on how many people come out and vote, and I think it also probably says a lot about how well respected Annise Parker was when she ran, and perhaps also says something about her opponents.
If I just may ask, how many people, percentage-wise, vote in Houston local elections? Does anybody know?
If I recall, it was 20%. I mean, our population doesn't vote, and I think a lot of that has to do with people. people feel there's no reason to vote around here. I mean, you guys go and you interview the people who talk about the anger and nothing's going to change, and they have somebody who promises them something, and now, wow! If you take a look at if you compare the Republican turnout compared to the Democratic turnout right now, you'll see that the Republican turnout is huge, right? And that is because you have an entertainer that is out there. And then you have all the event. I mean, they just prepared the perfect dynamic to create that sort of a. The Democratic turnout is down from 2008.
But even in Iowa and the Iowa caucuses, the turnout was high, but it's still a low percentage.
Yes.
So there you can really make a change because there are so few, and it's the first primary or the first caucuses. So. Yeah, it's very interesting to see.
What percentage of people, let's say, vote in Sweden or Finland?
Well, usually in the general election around for the parliament and prime minister, it's around 80, between 75 and 80. If it's more than 80, it's considered high. So around that.
Oh wait, if it's more than 80, it's high.
Yeah. So
and what that means is that your elected representatives are actually an indication of what the majority of your population wants, whereas with only 20% of the people voting, our elected representatives do not at all indicate what the majority of the population may want. We are
actually very concerned about our low voting percentage.
And what is
your low voting percentage?
It's about the same than in maybe around 70 mostly. But I mean, there's a lot of talk about how to activate the young people who don't vote anymore.
Ours is shamefully low.
Well, you see, that just shows that the people feel that they're getting something out of government. And what kind of government do you guys have again?
Well, we have a coalition.
No, but what I mean...
The government is social democratic.
Okay, let's ask a couple of questions.
Well, that is a defining difference between Americans and Scandinavians. We sort of think that government is working for us and provides us sort of a valuable services, meaning like free daycare, good quality daycare, good quality schools that are best in the world according to the PISA results, good free university education, free healthcare. We get stuff from the government. Here, government is seen as an oppressor that comes, with black helicopters to take away your rights. And that's, I think, because, U.S. has a very revolutionary history, and you see yourselves still as a sort of getting rid of the British king, and that makes the relationship between citizens and government a very hostile relationship.
I think what Laura said also before with America being so individualistic, there is no little room for the group, or I can even see that at our elementary school where my kids are. They only talk about the rules, obey the rules, and then they do great things in class, but the teachers never speak about the group. So how is the group working here in the classroom? So it goes back to the very, very basics. When my kids started preschool, like kindergarten in Sweden, the first thing they were talking about was the group. So how is the group functioning?
Right.
How they playing together? How do we do this? They teach them democracy from like age 3. So what are we going to do? Do we stay outside? Do we go there or there? Hands up.
Right.
And I think that's plays out in this as well, and also how government is done, and how it's very easy when you pay your taxes in Sweden. It's already paid for when you get your salary, so you never actually. Well, you can see it on the specifics, but you never actually pay them. They're already paid for. Things like that. You never pay the sales tax. It's already included. You don't see the taxes you pay to the same. But
you also feel that you get money. You get something for your money, because here when I compare my American taxes that are not so much lower than in Finland, and compare what I get for them, it's very little, and that is the problem. That with the difference in taxes, you actually have to save here like tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to educate your kids. We pay a little bit more taxes, but we actually have free, good quality universities, and that is like a huge difference in a middle class family's lives. And I always, Finland and Sweden are not the perfect countries, but I very much resent the fact that Americans always come and say free universities must be socialism, and I'm like, Soviet Union went 30 years ago. It's not as black and white. It's not as if you couldn't have something in between. And locally, you even might have states that has something like that working, and Americans don't resent it or don't call it socialism, but when it's in Scandinavia, it all of a sudden becomes socialism because some Americans want to see it as an extension of like a Soviet rule that oppresses people. I do personally think that it actually liberates people quite a bit.
Actually, it's not you think it liberates people. I can tell you for a fact it liberates people. As inefficient as Obamacare was, what it did, it allowed people who had their own companies to finally be able to go on their own, be more independent if they really wanted to do so. But one of the reasons I really, when they told us about, when I was told about you that I really wanted to have you on, is I was hoping to get that kind of characterization out of you. Again, Americans don't, we as Americans, we hear other Americans tell us how bad off you guys are. We get to hear how bad off your healthcare system is. Neither of you would dream of having our healthcare. I had an emergency situation here where my blood pressure went up to sky high and they had to call the ambulance and I went to the emergency room. You know what that cost me? $5,000.
Wow.
$5,000. And you know what my deductible on my insurance was or is? $6,000. Okay? Yeah. So these are the things that occur here in America that shouldn't occur. You remember when I said I hate when people talk about something being small, the efficiencies of scale. If all of us together are in, nobody has to have that problem. Go ahead, please.
I have one sort of a feminist point to make here. When we talk about child care, and here child care, of course, in Washington, D.C. is extremely expensive. If you want to have your kids, taken care of when you go to work, it's like $1,500 a month. In Finland, you have a government-provided very good quality daycare for about $250 a month, and that includes warm meals. So what that does, it's not as if the government is just giving you goodies. It actually liberates me to work, because otherwise I would be in the same situation than many American mothers. The childcare is just so expensive that I would actually not be able to choose whether I work or stay at home. I'd have to stay at home if I just could afford it, just because the daycare is so bloody expensive. But since we have inexpensive quality daycare, I can actually work, pay taxes, be a productive member of society, and advance my own career. So in a way, I can become more ambitious as a woman and a worker as the American
and productive society,
than American women. But somehow many of them are told that they are that they get to choose whether they stay at home or go to work. Well, but it's so bloody expensive. There's really no choice.
Thank you for doing what you're saying here, because I think this is important for other women to hear, because many of our women don't realize that they're voting against their own interests when they vote against these types of policies. But to have women who have kids and women who take care of their kids, women who have careers, knowing that their kids are well taken care of because they are within a system that cares, makes a difference. Do you want to say something, Madeline?
Yes, I think an interesting thing that people are not learning here because they're not being told is, I'm going to ask, what is the income divide in your country? In ours, I think last I saw a corporation president probably made 20.5
million
times as much more as the person on the bottom. So what's happening here is all this money that people feel like is being taken away from them is going up to the top, and it's being owned by less than 1% of the population that's very wealthy and can afford to go spend overnight at a resort that's cost $10,000 a night. I'm just going to guess and let you answer that the income divide in Sweden in Finland is probably not that much, and that's not where the money's going. It sounds like the money's going to the people.
Well, yes, and the income divide is much, much smaller in Sweden. Of course, it is growing, though. The divide is growing, yes, and we see increasing. We can, of course, I'm all for universal healthcare. When I go, it's free for children up to the age of 18. You never pay $1 or a crown, but there is also a discussion about quality there. When people have real issues, there's never any big arguments. It's usually very good quality. But of course, there's a debate about quality in Sweden has a big discussion about quality of schools, and we have had increasing segregation in schools, not in terms of skin color, but in terms of economic, socioeconomic segregation. But it's totally on another scale. So even if it's growing, it's still not close to the situation here in the United States.
Why is it growing? What's happening?
I think it's growing for a big number of reasons, actually. It's
Let me hold one second.
Sure.
Callers, the two callers, I'm coming to you. I just want her to finish her thought.
So it's growing because of, well, I think it's a tendency in many countries. This social democratic politics they're not as strong anymore. We have also deregulated a lot of markets, so it's so it is actually growing, and in some areas it's quite. I want
to add sorry to interrupt you. I just want to add the elephant to the room here. Okay, every society that is based on capital. Okay, again, as I said, as an engineer, all I care about is numbers. It is mathematically impossible for you to have a capitalist system run the way it is run in America, including the way it is run in Sweden and all these other places, that does not have a bias towards having income separated. And the only way you can get around that is to have some sort of redistribution. You guys were very efficient in redistribution with your services. As redistribution drops, which is what you're talking about when you say in Sweden, a lot of the social democrats are not as good as before or not as powerful as before. As that occurs, as deregulation occurs, what happens? You get where redistribution changes, and the system that ultimately controls, which is a capitalist system, causes what it naturally causes, which is it distributes income to the folks with capital. I got to go to a break. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Egberto. Let's take a look at weather around town. It is 73 degrees and plentiful sunshine. Expect clear skies through tomorrow. Low tonight of 42 degrees. High tomorrow of 67 degrees. And let's take a brief look at your afternoon commute. Slow going on the North Freeway outbound from Telephone all the way to Little York. And on the West Loop southbound at the Southwest Freeway, an accident is affecting the center lane to right shoulder. It's stop and go on the West Loop in both directions from Evergreen all the way up to the Katy Freeway, and slow going northbound to Irvington. You're tapping on the brakes on the Katy Freeway inbound from Shepherd to Gregg. And a few other slow going areas, but nothing out of the normal. On Southwest Freeway inbound, you're slow going all the way from Westland to the Gulf Freeway, and it's starting to get more and more dense out there. So take your time, be careful. That's a look at your Houston area weather and traffic. I'm Shannon McCurchie, and you are listening to 90.1 KPFT with Egberto Willies on Politics Done Right.
Hey, my great callers. I'm sorry that I've been slow with you, but these two young journalists from Scandinavia, and I really wanted them to be sort of an education for a lot of the listeners, and specifically women. Well, I should say that, but just to be able to see that there is another way that doesn't take anybody's freedom away, another way that doesn't take anything away from anybody. Actually, it makes things better. What it does is prevents the plutocracy from pilfering you, which is what the plutocracy is doing right now. And at the same time, they pilfer us, they misinform us. That is, by the way, folks, why you need stations like KPFT on air, because you're not going to get this on commercial radio. So do remember to go to kpft.org and make sure that we stay on air. But right now, let's go to Línea número 4. Let's go to John, my conservative friend. Come on in, my friend.
Hey, Egberto, how you doing?
All right, how you doing, sir?
Pretty good.
Talk to me.
I just wanted to give the ladies a little insight here from a conservative perspective.
Yes, sir.
The Donald Trump phenomenon, and God bless us if he gets elected. This isn't about immigration per se. Honestly, from our conservative point of view, this is about promises made and promises broken. This is totally anti-authority at this point. And Donald Trump is, at best an outsider. Yes, he's part of the plutocracy. If you want to throw him in there,
yes.
There are those of us in the conservative movement that see through what he is, we do like what he brought to the process, and that was not being politically correct and not being afraid to speak your mind. And we wanted to see that out of some of the more conservative candidates. But this isn't about any immigrant or anything along those lines. This is about we're tired of being lied to, even us conservatives, even here in Texas. And, Egberto, you know who the players are.
Yes, I do.
The John Culversons, Brady.
Mm-hmm.
These are people who stand up as quote-unquote rock-rib conservatives. And the truth of the matter is, for what we believe, how we should be governed, they have thrown in the towel and abdicated their role as Senate and Congress.
Now, John, you know I love you, brother. I really do. But the one thing that I have to say is that you are not the perennial or the typical conservative. You at least listen, and not only that, you're willing to take chances on doing things differently. If you take a look at the exit polls that came out of Iowa, exit polls that came out of New Hampshire, exit polls that came out of South Carolina and Nevada, what you find out is, I am sorry, Trump has made an indelible difference, or actually his thoughts are starting to metastasize not only in the minds of a whole lot of those people that are supporting him, but I went with Vargas canvassing here in Houston, and I was listening to Latinos and black folks saying the same thing.
But again, I think, and I mean, I know your background, and
yeah,
and what I do is I work with people and in sales, and I read people, and
mm-hmm.
that's my job.
Right.
But what I see here is I understand how the emphasis that the Trump supporters are getting from the media,
right,
how it's being spun that way. The Trump supporters don't even know why they support him.
That is true.
Yes. He has tapped into their frustration.
Yes.
Okay, and he's riding them like a friggin' hand puppet.
Yes, you're right.
His argument has been that he's not beholden to anybody. Well, no, because you want the job where you don't have to be beholden to anybody, but you can give everything that you want to all your buddies.
John, may I ask you a question, please?
Absolutely.
Are you one of the people who supports Trump exactly because, or you would see yourself or conservatives supporting Trump exactly because he's a millionaire and not despite of it, meaning that he is financially independent?
No, I don't support Trump.
Okay. But that is one of the reasons that I found when I've talked to Trump supporters, that they don't hold him being a businessman against him. They rather think that gives him the independence from the lobbyists and from the corporations, just like the Sanders people think on the other side.
Right, but see, my belief is it's actually the exact opposite. I mean, the people like Trump at that financial level, they already have all the money. So the money doesn't buy them influence. They've already got it. Mm-hmm. So to them, now what we're giving him is the influence. We're giving him the biggest influence in the world if we were to elect him.
I think what you say about establishment is very true, though, that that's one of the first things you ever hear out on the Trump rallies as well, right, that there's such a huge anger
and I don't know how
directed towards Washington.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want you to understand that, we've had the Congress, conservatives have, and now the Senate. And, arguably, Egberto, you can say we've been obstructionists, but that we still haven't gotten anything done. There are ways we could have gotten things done that the voters that put them there, wanted done, and they chose not to do it. They chose not to go the road less traveled. And that's what's really pushing Trump, in my opinion. It's we feel absolutely, positively betrayed.
But John, how are you supposed to ignore the Democrats and the president altogether? I mean, weren't they sort of democratically elected as well?
They were, but then look what happened. We had the 2008 elections, and then we had the midterm elections, and it changed. See, that's just it. In the American culture, our elections come quicker, and the mood of the country changes in who we elect. Now, we have a divided government, and there are checks and balances, and we started putting the pieces to stop those people that felt Washington from 2008 needed to be stopped from going down more of a socialist path. We put those people into office and got them elected that could do that. So we do have three branches of government,
John,
for a reason. Yes.
I appreciate your call, my friend. Thank you for calling, though, and I keep calling, keep listening. And by the way, sending your folks here. I love to speak to conservatives as well. You know that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. You take care, my brother.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, now. Hey, Look, let's go to line number 5. Come on in. Scott.
Thank you. I think I read recently that Finland has finally enacted marriage equality after some controversy. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Last summer.
Did you see any signs of Russian attempts at interference?
Well, I mean, let's say, no, not in that respect. Russia is our neighboring country, and we have a very traumatic history with Russia, as you know, 2 wars and all that. Russia has been trying to, I mean, there is a lot of cyber propaganda that Russia directs towards all its neighboring countries in many issues, except especially Ukraine. But as far as the gay marriage, I know that Russians are much more socially conservative than Finns, and I'm sure there was a lot of, Russian-speaking Finns that would not necessarily support gay marriage because they are more conservative than the young Finns, for example. But I would not have said that Russian propaganda would have been any kind of a major issue in our gay marriage decision. No.
Scott, because of we're running out. Scott, we're running out of time, so I'm going to have to let you go because I have one more call I can take. But you keep calling, you keep listening, my friend. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's go to Jack. Jack, you're the last call, real quick, please, because I only have about 30 seconds for you.
Sure. So the run up to Adolf Hitler in Europe, wasn't that because of intense anger in the populace?
Correct.
Yes. And what do you think about Donald Trump's tapping into that same vein?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't compare to Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler right now, but I mean, I still think that, yes, of course, economic downturn and hardship is often behind, popular revolts.
But there's also a big difference that Donald Trump doesn't propose big socialistic, collective solutions that both Mussolini and Hitler did. That's actually a difference.
That's a huge difference, isn't it?
A huge difference.
A huge difference. So absolutely. So any other question? Real quick question, Jack, and then I got to let you go.
Yeah, what's the average level of income tax that they have to pay in Scandinavia?
Say around 33%.
Okay.
And Finland?
Gosh, it's about the same, I
Depending
guess.
on your income.
It depends on your income,
right.
because you pay more if you're very, very wealthy.
Yeah, the fallacy that we have here as Americans is that somehow our friends over the pond are so overstressed with taxes that they just cannot live that life. And I think these 2 young ladies have proven that, or these 2 young journalists have proven that a fallacy. So folks, thank you very much for today's, Jack, thank you very much for calling. Okay, you have a good one, my friend. Thank you, my friend. Look, we had 2 wonderful journalists in today. Sanna Björlund. I got that right?
Yes.
And Laura Saarikoski. And I got that right. Thank you guys for being here with us. I think what you had to say has been very enlightening. I think folks like you guys need to speak up. If we are all friends, you are all friends. We all have to speak up. You have to help educate folks who don't know. So thank you for having been here. Folks, my name is Egberto Willies, and we are out.
Remember, thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. You can personally reach me by sending an email to egberto@politicsdoneright.com. Remember, Egberto is spelled E-G-B-E-R-T-O. Change starts with you. 90.1 KPFT gives you information not tainted by corporate interest. Please visit kpft.org and contribute. Let's ensure continued access to real information and news remain available to all. Again, thank you very much for listening to Politics Done Right.